Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, Darvin Ham gave a long interview to Marc Spears at ESPN, talking about all kinds of stuff, including whether or not Russell Westbrook is going to come off the bench or be in the starting lineup. Darvin's answer will be of high interest to Lakers fans. We'll get into it next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends, and particularly when news breaks. We're always providing fresh Lakers content, no matter how you get your podcasts or where you get your podcasts. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go not only to get the show a little early, particularly on non-game nights, but also, we got a little fun stuff going on that you can see that you can't quite hear on the audio product. So it's worth checking that out, subscribing. And of course, breaking news lands on the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel first. So just do it. Just subscribe. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of every day, but of course, only after you make us your first. Darvin Ham gave a really introspective and informative interview to Marc Spears at ESPN for Anscape. That's the new name for the Undefeated. And we're going to spend most of the day talking about that. And he talked about Anthony Davis. He got into LeBron James. He got into his own background and his coaching philosophy. All kinds of really fascinating stuff came out of it.
Yeah, if you have not read this interview, definitely take the time. I mean,
absolutely.
Overarching reaction to it. If you are not excited already about Darvin Ham as the coach of this team, at least in terms of potential, or certainly about who Darvin Ham is as a person, I challenge you to read this interview and still feel the same way.
Yeah, I just suspect you're doing it wrong. And it, in this particular case, is kind of everything in terms of what your worldview is on human beings. Because I don't know if he's an X's and O's genius, as a human being, as a person of integrity and a person of who has a proverbial code, Andy, Darvin Ham is really impressive, and you get a great sense of that in this conversation with Marc Spears. So all that stuff we're going to unpack, but really there is some news that comes out of it, and we have speculated a lot. Lakers fans have speculated a lot on what the role for Russell Westbrook will be on this team, assuming he is still on it when training camp begins and isn't, somewhere else and as part of a Kyrie Irving deal. Marc Spears asked Ham whether or not, what role he sees for Westbrook, whether he sees him as a starter going into the season, and Darvin Ham unequivocally says yes.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is newsworthy.
Yeah, he said, yes, indeed. It's just the way we're going to play and the type of people that's going to be out there on the floor. That's the biggest thing. He also, when asked about his general thoughts on Westbrook, said, quote, count it out prematurely. I've had great interactions with Russ in person, over dinner, over the phone, over text messages. I love Russell Westbrook, man. Just his mentality, his approach, just to see him, a guy that magnitude and everything he's done in the league to get hated on. But being me, I got a wholehearted plan, a clear plan on how I'm going to use it. I showed it to him, sat down, brought stuff up. I think he's going to flourish. We ain't going to try to curtail his energy. We're just going to diversify it, redirect it. That sentence in and of itself, I found really interesting.
Diversify and redirect the energy of Russell Westbrook.
But that's really important, though. I mean, that's something we've talked about a lot over the course of, we were both obviously really familiar with Russell Westbrook. He's been in the league, I think, 14 years. We've followed the league very closely. We've covered him in playoff series, all sorts of stuff. But it's always different when you see a player game in, game out, for better and for worse. And one of the things that I noticed with Russell Westbrook is he plays very hard, but plays very hard in a very specific, singular, and sometimes I would say tunneled vision, destructive way. And
plays, there are certain things that don't penetrate the hard playing, the cone of effort.
He's a very weird combination, Russell Westbrook, of versatile and narrow in terms of his skill set. You know what I mean? Like he can do a lot of different things, but it doesn't always seem to translate to doing a lot of different things, which is a weird thing, but it's very much his mentality and the way he approaches and what he seems to value in the game. In a lot of ways, it's the inverse of what we used to see covering Lamar Odom, who was an incredibly versatile player, and I think wanted to genuinely use his versatility in a more diverse way on both sides of the ball and towards like a team concept than Russ did. But there were times with Lamar where you're like, you can be a little more narrow in your approach to the game. Like it wouldn't kill you to go out there and try to be a little more selfish, man.
Yeah, Lamar was a sportsman though. So I think here's my take on this. It is a great thing to say. And I love the terminology about it in terms of diversifying and refocusing and all that kind of stuff. So much of that, and I know this is a point that you've made, is about Russ and not about Ham and the coaching staff and that kind of thing. Like Russ may like the idea of having his energy diversified and refocused and repurposed in a lot of different ways, and they might love it as a staff. They still got to get him to do it. And I'm sure Frank Vogel's staff had many of the same ideas and hopes and dreams for what they wanted Westbrook to be doing. And ultimately it didn't work. Where I will say this, I expect there to be initially a much better level of buy-in from Russ towards Darvin than he gave to Frank. And whether that's Frank's fault, whether that's just context and the disaster of last season shaping everybody's focus on what's going on this year, doesn't matter. Well, it maybe matters to Frank Vogel, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for this season. So I expect Russ will at least give a more of a college try to the stuff that Ham is asking him to do that is further outside his comfort zone. But were you surprised though, Andy, to see that very enthusiastic commitment to, yes, Russell Westbrook is a starter? Because Darvin, I don't want to say set him up to be a bench guy at his introductory press conference, but he seemed to leave the door open more to it. He didn't commit at the very least as seemingly as firmly as he did in this conversation with Marc Spears.
No, I'm not very surprised. First of all, we're so far off from the season beginning that in certain respects, it doesn't really matter what he says. I mean, it matters in terms of creating headlines, but in terms of his actual plans and how it plays out in the season, especially when everybody knows the Lakers are actively looking to trade Russ anyway. I mean, he could come out and say, as far as I'm concerned, everything runs through Russ. And while that would obviously create tremendous headlines, first. Yeah, it would create incredible headlines. The reality is, what difference does it make? It's early July. They don't start playing until late October. So who cares? But at the same time, this is part of trying to build that bridge with Russ that is better. He talked about going to dinners with Russ. He talks about having a lot of open communications with Russ. I am willing to assume that if Russell Westbrook sent Darvin Ham a bottle of champagne to congratulate him, the correspondence thanking Russ was, if nothing else, in Russ's mind, much more sincere and overflowing than whatever he got from Frank Vogel after Russ sent that bottle to congratulate the Vogels on their anniversary, and in Russ's mind didn't see it reciprocated appropriately. But Russell Westbrook is, all things being equal, one of the most talented guys on this team. The fit is obviously an issue. And if the fit does not work with him as a starter, I don't expect Darvin Ham to be afraid to make that move, to move into the bench, because Darvin Ham's going to be here longer than Russell Westbrook. And I think has far more agency within the organization than
Another thing
Westbrook
that's different
does.
about the context between
Right.
last year and this year.
But if you can make this functional with Westbrook alongside LeBron and AD, the chances are that is going to create a better starting lineup. And either way, you have to figure out ways to make LeBron, AD, and Russ work together, whether Russ comes off the bench or starts, because he's in the upper half of talent on this team easily.
Yeah. And I think what you said about that bridge, I think is critical here, because if you want to get to a place where Russ isn't going to kind of begrudgingly go to the bench, where he's going to give you that same energy and effort and commitment in a wildly different role from everything he's ever done in his entire
or even
career,
as a starter, because Russ
right.
Russ does not like adjusting. He doesn't like
he doesn't. He doesn't like change.
And though he says he's the big adjuster, he's done it his whole career.
He's wrong about that. He's mistaken. You do that by starting at the place that respects, in Russ's mind especially, respects that his accomplishments and respects his place in the league. And then I think you work from there to the next places that are more uncomfortable to Russ. Another really interesting piece that came out of this was when he talked about Anthony Davis, Darvin did, and why Anthony Davis is the key to what the Lakers are going to be doing going forward this season. And that's something that we love to see and completely agree with. And we'll talk about why next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Truebill. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill. Companies make it intentionally hard for you to cancel your subscriptions, but Truebill makes it really simple. Just link your accounts. Truebill will cancel the unwanted subscriptions in one tap. Both my wife and I signed up for Truebill, and it is extremely user-friendly. It is very informative. Truebill has over 2 million users, including my wife and I, and has helped them save collectively over $100 million. So don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA.
So Anthony Davis, Darvin Ham asked about him by Marc Spears at Anscape, formerly the Undefeated, over at ESPN, in a really wide-ranging Q&A. Says this: with AD, and now this is Darvin, I would say he's the biggest factor. I'm looking forward to him having a huge year this year. I know the way we're going to play is going to benefit him. The way I'm going to take care of him, make sure we take care of him, is going to benefit him. That size, that skill, that approach. What you saw in the bubble, we're bringing that back. And again, we've got to make sure we take care of him, meet all of his needs physically, and make sure he's in a good space mentally, spiritually. But he's the factor. This bleep ain't going to work without AD being right. There is very little in that paragraph that I would disagree with. And at its core, I think it is 100% correct to look at Anthony Davis as the giant X factor for this season, because the difference between the Lakers being okay, and I mean, even if they get Kyrie, the biggest difference between the Lakers being a real contender and just a team that has, can make the playoffs and has a puncher's chance against someone, is Anthony Davis being first team all NBA caliber versus an all-star, which is good, but it's not good enough. That's what will separate the Lakers and give them a real chance to do something that maybe people aren't expecting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any way around it, because at this stage of his career, you can't ask that consistently from LeBron on both sides of the ball. And we're starting to see signs that his body is not going to be automatically counted on to be there over the course of an entire season anyway. He's had injuries 3 of the 4 years he's been with the Lakers, which has been very counter to the rest of his career when he was treated like a cyborg as opposed to a human being. That's not LeBron anymore, and it's not reasonable to expect that. And whether Russell Westbrook is the third guy on this team or Kyrie Irving is the third guy on this team, neither one of them are going to be capable of doing as much on both sides of the ball. But, to try to be a force defensively, the best you can hope for them is bought in and passable. But beyond that, they can't affect as many areas defensively that Anthony Davis can, even at their absolutely most invested.
Right.
So,
And even LeBron it's hard for LeBron to be better when he played. It's hard for him to be better than he was last year. The defensive effort, like you say, can pick up here and there, but his performance isn't going to get much better than it was last year. I just
certainly
that
not
to me sticks out.
offensively.
No, absolutely.
And look, maybe if Kyrie, and this is something we might get into later in the show, but maybe if either Kyrie is on the team or Russell Westbrook is really able to be utilized in a way that feels closer to a positive version of Russell Westbrook, and AD is on the court more and a better offensive version of himself, maybe LeBron, some of those responsibilities are taken off him and he can devote a little more.
Right, but broadly speaking, I think it's unfair to LeBron to ask for more than the performance that he gave you last year, particularly, again, offensively.
But it's also, too, the plan was always supposed to be Anthony Davis being that guy anyway, and you're starting to bridge beyond everything revolving around LeBron as opposed to Anthony Davis is that guy with LeBron as the one driving the car. AD is the engine, but LeBron is the one steering it. And, the power in your car comes from that engine. You're supposed to be getting that from Anthony Davis by now.
Look
and
at
I think
all those Rock Auto ads are really working.
Exactly.
Really a car guy now. Look at you.
And make sure, by the way, that the engine that we're talking about is not bought from a chain store.
From some chain store, the dealership, or whatever.
Right. I mean, the best version.
You're just getting whatever engine they've got lying in the back. You don't know if it's the one that you want.
Right. Rock Auto, though, rockauto.com would give you the best version of an Anthony Davis engine. There's no question about it. But we were supposed to have already reached a point where you are transitioning into Anthony Davis being the dude with LeBron as the guy with the gravitas and the basketball wisdom and the guy whose voice matters the most and steers everything. But it doesn't feel like he has the most physical responsibilities. That's supposed to be Anthony Davis anyway.
It just, everything about it is 100% correct. And we were talking before we started just about, and I know you've mentioned on a couple shows that some of the statistical output of Anthony Davis, certainly his 3-point shooting and the percentage on long twos and all this stuff is going to be difficult to replicate in the bubble because it is an aberration to what he's done over the course of his career. But where I think people look with AD in terms of it's not even just straight percentages and this and whatever, it's it's impact. And everybody who watches this team says the same thing. Did you feel Anthony Davis when he put up 24 and 8 versus other days when he puts it up, same numbers, but you didn't feel him? That's what separates Davis from being a all-star. His numbers are going to make him an all-star if he plays enough games. He's too good. To an MVP candidate, the guy who dominates games, who is the story and the player that you cannot stop watching. When he's at his best, when he was doing stuff at the bubble, you didn't look away from AD in the same way that there are nights you just don't look away from LeBron or don't look away from Steph or don't look away from Giannis because they don't let you. That's the AD that they're going to need 65 times next year to rise in the Western Conference, and then they're going to definitely need it in the playoffs. And I love that Darvin IDs it and lays the expectation out for him and says, this is what you need to be. And we are dedicated to doing everything we can to support you in the process of getting you there.
Yeah. Those bubble numbers, I've gone through some of the shooting percentages, by different areas on the floor, particularly when you start getting the long mid-range. And the percentages that AD put up in the bubble, I don't think can be replicated. I mean, he was shooting 52% from 16 to 23 feet. And that's like 10 to 20% higher than his averages over his career. And I don't mean to present it even like a fluke as much as it is just this is beyond what he typically does in ways that I just don't think are sustainable. Like I don't think he is that good at that particular thing to do it regularly. Maybe I'm wrong, and I would I would love to be wrong. I would love to be incorrect about this. But
Right.
even if you get to a middle ground version consistently, which includes, by the way, just being on the damn court game in and game out. If you start getting into Anthony Davis's shooting percentages somewhere between what we've seen at his most disappointing and what you saw in the bubble on a regular basis, it will open up stuff for his teammates. It'll open up opportunities for him as a playmaker. It will make him pretty damn close to unguardable.
Yeah, and hopefully it's a reflection, because
it'll change his mentality too.
That's I think the core of it is, what does it look like? What is it? How does he approach what he's doing? The confidence, the aggressiveness, the whatever, the sort of takeover factor. That's what I'm looking for, and I think hopefully the attitude ends up being reflected in the numbers. But either way, for Darvin to put the finger on him the way he did, I think is correct, and is also, I think the way he did it in this interview is fantastic. You are the key, and we will help you. So you're not on an island here trying to do it. A few other things, both from Darvin the man, Darvin the culture, and where he draws his inspiration, that we both found really interesting in this interview, as we continue, and we'll get to all of that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net, your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports development, league reviews, and news, including baseball, boxing, MMA, NFL futures, way more, just across sports. It is never too early to start betting on the 2023 NBA champions. No surprise, at last look, Golden State Warriors, the clubhouse leaders, tied with the Phoenix Suns, with those expectations of Kevin Durant perhaps joining them, although I'm sure those odds are fluid, because who the hell knows what's going on with that. The Lakers, though, their odds, when last checked, went up from mid-June from 20-1 to 10-1, specifically because of those Kyrie Irving rumors. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Okay, so we've been talking to you about the newest partner that we have on our show, Locked On Lakers, our show, Doer. They are DUER, and they are the makers of the most incredibly comfortable clothes that are incredibly versatile as well. It's natural performance clothing. It's simple, and these are staple items in your wardrobe. That's what I really love about them. So over the course of the day, you can be riding your bike into the office. You can go to the meeting. You can go to the park and whatever it is, and your stuff still looks good in the process. I've got a couple shirts. I've got the jeans. I've got the Live Free Adventure pants, the No Sweat joggers, and I love them. And I know, Andy, you're wearing them too, and we both appreciate that we actually get to talk about a clothing brand and endorse a clothing brand that we actually like and wear the clothes.
Plus, what I really love too, they're made from 95% natural fibers. So Doer is really good for the planet, while you actually look good and feel good in the process. So everybody wins when you are wearing Doer.
If you're in LA, go visit the Doer store, go feel the stuff, go touch it. You can understand why exactly it is we are this enthusiastic about it, and what makes it so comfortable. It's 170 South La Brea Avenue in Mid-City. Again, 170 South La Brea Avenue in Mid-City. If you can't make it into the store, that's fine. You can go to shopdoer.com. No matter how you do it, you get 15% off with our exclusive discount code. It's Locked On 15, whether that's in store, on the store on La Brea, or you're going to the website shopdoer.com. 15% off by using Locked On 15. Again, Doer, DUER. They are the most comfortable pants that you are ever going to find. One of the things that jumped out to me, Andy, was the way that Darvin Ham talked about his experience as an assistant, who he's worked for, the sort of the lessons he's learned, and the kind of culture that he wants to bring to LA and instill with the Lakers. And he talked about working for Mike Budenholzer and working in that system in Milwaukee as the gold standard. And so often when people come and coach the Lakers, there is this tendency. I'm not saying Darvin Ham doesn't respect the history of the franchise and all this stuff and so on, but there's this sort of tendency and almost like this feeling like you have to look at everything the Lakers do as you know, the gold standard across the NBA, and this is how it's done, and look at this. And to some degree, that's true. No franchise, certainly since, you know, in the modern era, has had more success than the Lakers. But the Lakers aren't the gold standard anymore. Not over the last 10 years. They've made the playoffs twice in the last 9 seasons, and have advanced past the first round once. Other teams have passed them in terms of how they do things, and, you know, the way the organization operates and the intelligence with which they operate and all that. And I loved that Darvin Ham had the confidence to say, we're bringing things that are excellent from other places, and we're going to instill that here. There wasn't that deference to doing things whatever the Laker way is supposed to be these days. And I thought that was both noteworthy and refreshing.
Yeah, it probably helps that Darvin has been a member of this organization when he was part of Mike Brown's staff like a decade or so ago.
I agree.
When they were not at the absolute peak. I mean, they were a playoff team. They were certainly better than they've been. You know, goes to show you don't know what you got till it's gone. Remember how much everybody was complaining about the Mike Brown years. That looks pretty incredible compared to what's happened since Mike Brown. But you know what I mean? Like, and to your point, it's not that Darvin doesn't respect and I'm sure in a lot of ways revere what the Lakers have done as a franchise in terms of their overall history, but you don't want to be blinded by it. And in that sense, it helps, I think, to have been on the inside when the spotlight wasn't quite as dazzling, in order to, I think, maintain that type of confidence becoming the coach of this particular organization as a first-time head coach. As much as we both think that it's not nearly the thing that a lot of people make it out to be, you know, as far as the Lakers, and this isn't a starter job. And we've both been pretty insistent on, no, a first-timer can handle this depending on who that first-timer is. I do think it helps that Darvin has seen enough up close that he wouldn't automatically just be bowled over by it.
Yeah, but it's part of the confidence that he has, like, through the entire thing, and confidence in his own skill level, confidence in sort of the inevitability of him getting this kind of opportunity, confidence in the grind that he put in his process, in his intelligence, like all of that stuff shines through. And, you know, I think, you know, LeBron, for example, I think is going to love being coached by Darvin. LeBron throughout his career, that's why he liked Ty Lue, is that he likes guys that push back. He likes to be coached. He likes that stuff. LeBron wants lots of control, and throughout his career has gotten it and deserves it. But he also doesn't want a pushover to be and Darvin Ham is not going to be scared of LeBron. Like, nothing about this job, I think, is going to be too much for him in that way. And this was another reflection of it. I thought that he is not awed by the Laker way to the point that he feels like he's got to change everything that he knows and the things he holds valuable, or somehow bend to what they do here. He's going to impose his beliefs and his system and his style on this franchise. And it needs it. It really, really needs a new way of doing things. That building really needs it.
I mean, it's what he was hired to do. If you don't want him to do that, particularly with where the organization has been, you know, the championship notwithstanding, it has been really chaotic, really unsuccessful, and really rudderless. If you're not looking for Darvin Ham to do that, frankly, you're just doing it wrong. Like, if it's not Darvin Ham, it should be somebody else. But the idea that you're looking for a guy to maintain status quo would be, I mean, just
Or so like do the Laker thing, just polish it up and do it again. Like, no, they need something different in that building.
The thing in this interview with Marc Spears, and again, people should absolutely check it out, that jumped out at me at the most, it was sort of a twofold count. He was talking about how just his mentality that allowed him to stay in the league for a decade, despite averaging like 4 points on his career or something like that. And just the type of teammate that he was, the type of energy that he would provide, like the professionalism, the work ethic. And, it's how he got respect from guys like Bernie Bickerstaff, George Karl, Larry Brown, Terry Stotts, like those level of coaches. And then Marc Spears asked him, does that mentality stick with you as a head coach now? That mentality of the role guy who's just grinding his way through, kind of like what we talked about yesterday's show with Juan Toscano Anderson, the I don't want nobody to take my job mentality. Mm-hmm. And when asked if that mentality sticks with you as a head coach, Darvin Ham said, yes, indeed, bro. It bothers me sometimes when you're up 30 points, right? You've got these kids that don't really get no shine, don't get no tick. You have to put them in the game. You're like, oh no more fast breaks. We're already up 30. And like, there's somebody watching them, evaluating them. Like, man, why ain't they going hard? Dude, okay, if it's a 30-point blowout, that ain't my fault. Your team should have been better prepared and played better. But who am I to tell these kids not to go hard? They've been waiting for this opportunity. I understand sportsmanship and all of it, but that part I don't get. And what I loved about that, first of all, is, again, it is just a reflection of a guy that lived that in the NBA and recognizes what is important for all of the players on his team. Not just the stars, and the stars are going to get catered to the most, and rightly. But, both of us understand that and have no issues with it. But the other guys matter. So it's a reflection of Darvin Ham recognizing, the importance of everybody on that roster and how they collectively create a team. But also, too, man, like this notion of you stop playing because a game's gotten, quote, too out of hand, and you're not supposed to be scoring, you're not supposed to take a three at a certain point. Like, get the F out of here with that, man. Like, if the game's that far out of hand, stop the game. Just stop it with 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter and let everybody go home. Let the fans go home, let the players go home. Otherwise, you are playing that game. And he is correct. You never know who is watching. You have to assume somebody's watching. I remember a couple years ago, Troy Daniels told me a great story the year that he was on the championship team. And Troy really didn't play much that season. But he said that he used to treat his pregame warmups like a showcase for the fans, because fans who get there early love watching that stuff, and watching a guy bomb threes, hitting them, is fun for fans. But also he was like, you don't know who is watching from another team. And if I make 30, 43s in a row, that's going to impress somebody. And a guy in my position always needs to be impressing. A guy that is the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th man on the Lakers always needs to be in the position to impress when they get an opportunity. And Darvin Ham understands that as well as anybody. And I just thought that was great.
And on a team like this that is made up of guys like that, it's got 3 stars, and it's going to have 3 stars no matter who's the third guy. It's going to be 3 stars, but then it's going to be 4 through 15. I don't want to say it's going to be a bunch of Darvin Hams, because some of them are of a higher pedigree than that, so to speak.
They can't all average 4 points a game. Like, we need more
points
production.
a game was a good year for Darvin. but like, in all seriousness, we don't have to. We're not going to. We'll talk about this over the course of the summer. Like, it takes a certain kind of guy to be. We're going to talk about character and understanding what contributes to a team. Whether what Troy Daniels is talking about, what Juan Toscano Anderson was talking about at his introductory press conference on Wednesday. He lasted a decade, Darvin, in the league, never averaged more than 5 and change. That is really hard to do.
Yes, it is.
Like, really hard. And so this guy gets it. And this roster is a lot. It's Darvin Ham-esque from 4 to 15. And his ability to connect with those guys and get the most out of them is going to be integral to seeing how far the Lakers can go. So again, go read the story. I'm sure we'll carry some of these topics into next week. These are themes that we're going to be talking about a lot with Darvin. So Great work from Marc Spears at Anscape, again, formerly The Undefeated. Reminder, Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the podcast a little bit early, particularly on non-game days. Shopdoer.com is where you go to get the world's most comfortable pants. 170 South La Brea. Seriously, go in there. Take a day. You don't even need the whole day. That's probably too much.
Quit your job. Go to Doer.
It's not like going to Disneyland. It doesn't require a whole day or park hopper passes. But take some time, go in there, try the stuff on. You'll get what we mean. And we'll see everybody on Monday.